let's move on to our next presenter, Andrei Greenawalt from VIA. Andrei, if you want to share your screen, if you have a presentation, and introduce yourself, the floor is yours.
Great. Can you hear me okay, Jean?
Yes, can hear you just fine.
Great. Okay, let me try to present here. I'm not the best at tech for someone who works at a tech company. Yeah.
You're not supposed to admit that.
Oh, I know. Is it showing
yes.
now? Okay.
Yes, you can see it.
I got some sort of Microsoft Teams pop up. Okay. Great. Get this into screen. Okay, you're still with me, Jean, right?
Yep, still with you. Still got your screen up.
Okay, great. Well, hi, everyone. It's great to see a number of you by video. I'm sorry that we're not able to do this in person, but thank you, Jean, for inviting me to, and Carol for inviting me to talk about some of VIA's work in the time of COVID, and I'll touch on sort of what I see as the policy and other implications for this going forward.
Andrei, you just got muted somehow. You need to try and unmute yourself.
Okay.
Yeah.
There you go.
I'm pretty sure I didn't do that to myself, but
yeah, not sure how that happened.
Anyway, I think Chris covered this in a slide, and I'm guessing everyone in this group is very well aware of the dramatic drops in ridership that we've seen on transit as a result of COVID. I think it's worth a reminder that it's not like we were without challenges in the transportation space even before COVID, right? So we had these challenges of congestion, transportation being #1 on GHG emissions, and then equity, which I'm very happy to see, I think is getting increasing attention over the last couple of months for a variety of reasons. We don't have a system that was providing good access to jobs for folks who are low and middle income. And I think in terms of how I'm thinking about COVID, I think there's the chance that if we're not smart about this, that all of these are going to get dramatically worse. Obviously, we saw drops in congestion and emissions as people stopped moving around, but as cities start to come back, this is a very live conversation in New York City, for example, where it's being referred to as Carmageddon, the worry of people shifting from transit. Even if a lot of people are working from home, if you have even fairly subtle shifts away from transit to private vehicles, there's a chance that all of these are going to get much, much worse. And we were already facing pretty significant challenges heading into COVID. So just, I think, sorry, it's not, sorry, my slide is not advancing for some reason. Okay, here we go. Okay. This is just a quick summary of VIA's work, which...
So Andrei, what we're seeing is just your first screen. So I wonder if you're sharing something different than what you're maneuvering from.
Yeah, let me get away from the full screen there.
Okay, there you go.
Okay. Yeah, that's good.
Okay, we'll just do it like this. You won't get the movie experience, but we'll just do the smaller screen here. Okay, great. So. Right, I think a lot of people think of VIA sort of focused on on-demand microtransit, which we are, but we are also operating now in a number of other kind of public mobility areas. We are operating several paratransit services in the US and across the world. We're working with universities on their safe ride shuttles. We just launched with Columbia University recently as an example. And we're working with school districts like the Department of Education in New York City and elsewhere on providing tracking and better routing on yellow school buses. So we're working sort of with the public sector on a wide variety of services. And this is just another representation of that, sort of the different types of entities that we partner with, both cities and agencies, and then a bunch of operators and others. This is just a quick update on where we are in the world. The ones that have a little red cross next to them are an indication of places where we have launched some sort of service or adjusted service in reaction to COVID. And so I just wanted to walk you all through just a couple of case studies, and then touch on sort of the future a little bit at the end. So Jersey City is an interesting deployment that we launched right before COVID hit. We launched it in February 2020 to provide better transportation in the city there as a partnership with the mayor, who was looking at both getting private cars off the road and increasing connectivity, especially for low-income neighborhoods. And just wanted to show you a little bit of sort of the impact on our riders of COVID. This is a graph that shows, and we don't actually, we don't track or have the income levels of our actual riders. So this is based on looking at census data of what each, neighborhood or area, what the average income level was in those neighborhood, and then extrapolating from that. But this just shows kind of relative drops based on those neighborhoods and the income levels when COVID hit. And we're seeing this across our deployments in the U.S. And what you see, which is interesting, to us at least, is that lower income riders, you don't have as much of a drop sort of as COVID hit, and they also have bounced back a bit more quickly than higher income riders, which is probably consistent with what's happening with typical public transit as well. I'd say normally we're seeing drops that were a bit less than, and in some places much, much less than the traditional transit options. And I think that's been in part because of our ability in a number of these places to adjust the service very quickly to meet the needs of the time. And so just to give a couple other examples, I wanted to include LA Metro because Josh Shank from LA Metro presented on our first last mile deployment with them at the January meeting at TRB for any of you who were there. So I thought this would be a nice way to keep the thread going on that. And so as a reminder, we've been working with LA Metro on a deployment now for over a year that focuses on connecting folks from low income neighborhoods to transit hubs. And the way it was constructed initially was that you had to take a ride to a transit hub or from a transit hub. You weren't sort of able to just ride anywhere that you wanted. When COVID hit, I think both LA Metro and us recognized that there were, it would behoove us to make some changes. So we very quickly, just in a matter of a couple of days, changed the service a bit so that you could take it to medical centers and grocery stores and other essential services. And we were able to limit capacity in each of the vehicles to ensure social distancing. We also were able to partner with some local NGOs to provide food delivery to vulnerable populations. And so this was just one example of the ability to adapt quickly in reaction to a crisis. Another example is from England, Seven Oaks. This was a partner that we were planning to launch with in a few months, and they actually accelerated the launch timeline in response to COVID because they had 7 fixed route bus lines that saw dramatic drops in ridership, and so they transitioned all of that to an on-demand service during this time, and were able to also include a number of hospitals in the area. We saw a pretty dramatic increase in utilization as a result of these changes, as well as a 46% reduction in the miles that were being driven. So this was a sort of a good example of a deployment in which they quickly realized that their fixed route service wasn't sort of meeting the need of the time, and it was needed for adjustment. And then finally, another one in the US, somewhat similar to Seven Oaks, we worked with Columbus on a consulting engagement very early on in COVID as they were looking at reducing some fixed route service, and were able to come in and provide an on-demand service that covered all of the stops of 3 of the fixed route lines that they were suspending, as well as include key locations, hospitals, and an industrial center. And so I think I know I'm marching along here. I think as we think about the future of transit and sort of what's happening with COVID, we've done all this work adjusting to the current moment. I think there are very big questions about what the future of transit will look like. And as I think about it, and sorry, I don't spell this out in a slide completely, but to me, there are sort of 3 key things, right? One, we have to make existing transit services as safe as possible in order to get people back on them. And so there's some very obvious things around PPE and cleaning and things like that that obviously transit agencies are doing across the country. We believe there's also potentially a role for technology to play in capacity planning, in ensuring that there is social distancing on buses, in contact tracing to the extent you discover that someone on public transit has gotten COVID. And so I think, that's sort of one, is using technology as part of the suite of safety measures to increase folks' confidence in coming back to public transit. Two, I think we need to do a better job of really integrating on demand with fixed route services, which we, I think COVID has either encouraged or forced some agencies to start to do, which is great. But I think, rather than continuing sort of to do a series of demonstration projects or pilots, we have an opportunity now as we come back to really think about how do we fit these things in together. We have examples of places that are using fixed route service during the day, and then on Sunday evenings, for example, are switching to on demand, right? That's one way to combine fixed route with on demand. Another way is you do geographic differences, right? So what we're doing in Columbus, where you still have fixed route in core dense areas, but you use on demand for coverage in areas that have lower demand. So just a much better sort of integration of on demand with fixed route services. And then the third thing I would say is I think we need to dramatically expand public transit in areas that don't have it, and I think on demand has a critical role to play there. T for America put out a really good report several weeks ago on rural transit, and the somewhat counterintuitive fact that huge numbers of people in rural America actually don't own cars and don't have good transportation options. And so I think as we come out from this, obviously we need to do what we can to save the core services in our big cities, but I think it's also an opportunity to think about how we can expand beyond, because I think if we don't dramatically improve public transit and dramatically expand it, we're not going to be getting at those issues in my first slide of reducing congestion, reducing greenhouse gas emissions, and improving equity. And even the greenhouse gas and congestion pieces have a disproportionate impact on folks who are low income. So that's what we are working on. I think I'm at 12 minutes here, and I'll just stop and leave a little extra time for questions.
Great, thank you so much. Great information. I know some of you have been asking about contact information for speakers. We'll make all of that available to you, but if the speakers want to go ahead and put their contact information in the chat space, that would appease some people and give them that opportunity. So thank you for that presentation. Interesting things going on and definitely heightened by COVID. So our next presenter is Scott Shepard from iomob. I'm gonna turn it over.
Great.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you. Just to sound check, everyone can hear me. Hi.
Yep, we can hear you.
So I'll be sharing my screen momentarily, but thank you for having me, Jean, Carol, and Prachi. I really appreciate this opportunity. So let me first share my screen, and then I will go ahead and introduce myself here. So give me one moment. Okay, and just one other check. Can you see my screen?
Yes, we can see it. You're not in presenter mode, but you're in full. There you go.
There we go. Okay. So let me stuff. So I'm the one American expat on the call here. I'm calling you all from sunny Lisbon, Portugal. My name is Scott Shepard. I'm Chief Business Officer with iomob. We're primarily a European-focused mobility as a service operator and provider. However, we have integrations and operations in North America and Asia as well too. What I'm here to speak with you about today is a bit more of a focused use case around our work with the European Commission and several different partners here in Europe related to our proposal for Horizon 2020 project, which is CORMAS, the COVID-19 Resilient Mobility as a Service project, how that relates to iomob's core technology for open mobility roaming in Europe, and how these features related to social distancing and a return to normal basically boost public transport. They essentially foster sustainability, and they are used as a platform for essentially providing a connectivity network of providers throughout different European cities that can be utilized as a basis for a marketplace that is essentially integrated with all different forms of shared mobility. So we'll just continue on here. A slide that probably everyone has already seen, but I want to talk about before and after, because what we have here is basically trends in disrupting the personal automobile pre-COVID and post-COVID. And that problem has not gone away. Actually, it's only been exacerbated, as the term has been utilized a couple times on this presentation earlier by my colleagues in terms of Carmageddon. iomob, we're going to be doing a presentation with Transport Catapult in the UK tomorrow talking about that same topic, which is this return to normalcy in terms of impacting the over-reliance on individual automobile usage. Certainly my hometown of Los Angeles, California, as well as many other places, is severely being impacted given the reticence of utilization of public transport and other modes that introduce anxiety and friction in essentially this new landscape related to consumer behaviors and related to the new work habits that we have related to telework and other forms of mobility. So this is one impact and one trend that we do not see going away, but it's only being exacerbated by some of these changes. Another trend that was pre-COVID and post-COVID is a fragmented market in the shared mobility marketplace. Now we have many different transformations in the mobility marketplace related to M&A, merger and acquisition, related to consolidation, related to bankruptcy, and related to other areas of trends where we're seeing certain mobility service providers and operators drop off the landscape. New ones are being spun up, and others are being acquired and aggregated. But in essence, from a consumer and a individual perspective, the market is still fragmented. And it's fragmented because, again, there's many different business models and consumer models related to how do inhabitants pre-COVID and now post-COVID, I'll get more into the European project in a second, how do we navigate our urban experience? And then also look at the challenges of social distancing and other areas where we have a new level of friction in terms of our daily mobility habits. And these challenges in a fragmented mobility marketplace span a full range of spectrum related to a monopolization of the market and related to an open marketplace. So we can talk about that more in a moment, maybe even in the question and answer period. So specifically related to this project, this is a project that was proposal to the Horizon 2020 European Commission. The title is COVID-19 Resilient Mass. So it's mobilizing the mobility community to develop and deploy a mobility as a service solution with social distancing. So it's a very narrow use case. It's not about demand response transit. It's not about public transport analytics, and it's not about the full kind of mobility landscape. It's really just providing a mobility as a service app, a platform with social distancing features that solve specific near-term problems. And kind of a consortium of partners that have basically signed up for this this effort include many different European and multinational organizations such as Mass Alliance, such as New Cities, Polis, UITP, etc. So we're very excited about this project, and as well as other initiatives that have spun off with other partners here in Europe and in North America. To get a little bit deeper into kind of the nuts and bolts, the technical aspect, again, I'll keep this presentation short, and I'll be cognizant of time for question and answer, so I'll try to speed up my talk here. But there's three building blocks. One is our intermodal routing algorithms. So these are our proprietary algorithms, point A to point B, very simple. Two is our mass marketplace in 100+ European Union cities, so open mobility roaming, and our core mass platform is built upon the marketplace. And finally, it's an SDK, so software development kit. So we're not building white label apps. We're not building customized applications for public transport agencies or for corporate mobility clients. We are basically licensing and building either through our European Union project or through other projects that are commercially ventured as a middleware. So it's a software development kit that we license essentially for other providers, whether it's other third-party mass providers or developers, or for public transport authorities or corporate enterprises to basically be able to enrich and build their own mobility marketplace. So we are basically the partner behind the scenes in building these individual components to enrich their shared mobility experience. A little deeper now into the actual architecture and solution here is 3 different components. So we have our hub network, which is a global hub network of shared mobility providers. Level 4 integration now. So when we talk about integration of MSPs or mobility service providers, scooters, bikes, car share, taxi, ride hail, we're talking deep integration now. So the deep integration, to get very specific now, is discovery, find the device, find the vehicle, 2, registration, 3, book, 4, pay, all within the app. The app is the end repository of the iomob SDK. So the client app, whether it's in this project or others, is able to perform all these full functions without deep linking or jumping to an external app. That's very important because that prevents the friction and that increases the stickiness and utilization of the consumer experience for applications such as this. So the 3 components, we talked about the hub network, which are also integrated with individual urban networks across the European Union. We have our backend router and our hub registry, which connects to all the different level 4 deep integrations. I'll try to go through a brief animation here. Sometimes these can get a little bit kludgy, but on the right we have our overall visualization of our app showing the discovery of available scooters or devices near you, so the Find Me functionality. And then the next, which I think is more interesting, is on the left-hand side, the animation, which is our interurban trip. And this is related to our unique selling proposition, our USP with iomob, as being one of the world's first inter-city and intra-city mobility solutions from city to city. So this is not only we're talking deep integrations of mobility service providers within one city, but we're talking about your complete journey from Barcelona to Madrid, from Paris to London, from Brussels to Amsterdam, via trunk lines, via national rail operators, via large bus operators, et cetera, that basically stitch and connect your first and last mile solution for a bundled journey for door-to-door transit. So now what I'd like to highlight specifically is the basic technical architecture with the social distancing component related to this project. This is our routing. So origin and destination, A to B routing, finding your different features, and then looking at the different routes related to the filtering for social distancing. So either it's contactless payment, cleaning without a kit, occupancy, et cetera, et cetera. This will all be provided after this presentation and shared with the audience as well too. And then basically layering the social distancing filtered for the specific applications and routes that fit those parameters. And then we have our social distancing data that's captured and collected as part of that journey as well too. So can you help us get information for social distancing, crowdsourcing information for public transit, et cetera. So that is it for the animation. So a bit further along in the iomob story is our mobility marketplace. So not only do we have our deeply integrated mobility providers, which we coin as our micromobility bundle. So that's the MSPs I spoke about. But we have partnerships with other aggregators as well too, which only accelerate our reach across Europe and globally across other modes of mobility. So global ride hail taxi, car share, public transport, as well as shuttle and bus. So many different providers that we work with clients here locally and then globally. Just a really brief overview, certainly in the 2019 climate, but I think in 2020 this remains the same too. There's probably 4 or 5 different models or flavors of mass. And we can talk about that as well offline too. There's a private mass, which is more vertically integrated all within one. There's more of a hybrid mass, which is kind of a mixture of public and private, and more of a public mass, which is more oriented towards a public transport authority. Now, in terms of iomob's direction, we take more of a middle path in terms of we're not focused necessarily on a completely privatized business model, but we're not focused on a completely open public business model, either that the PTA basically controls that entire ecosystem. Again, we provide and license our middleware, our SDK, to enable and build that open mobility marketplace for a range of customers and consumers, whether they be public transit or whether they be universities or whether they be businesses. And just to round out our USPs, or unique value proposition, intermodal routing algorithms, deeply integrated MSPs, global mobility roaming, and really, if there's any takeaway here, it's our plug and play marketplace. And just a brief overview of who we work with and where we're at, awards, clients, and programs. And that is all I have. So I tried to truncate that so we have enough time for Q&A, but thank you, everyone. It's been a sincere pleasure, and I appreciate this opportunity.